The stench of lye and sweat had become so familiar to Delia Owens that she hardly noticed it anymore, though her raw, cracked hands reminded her daily of the price her body paid for survival in Seattle, Washington Territory, in the spring of 1882. Steam rose in thick clouds from the massive copper boiler in the cramped back room of Mrs. Henderson's laundry, where Delia had been working 14-hour days for the past year, ever since her father died in a logging accident and left her alone in the world at 19. The work was brutal, the pay barely enough to cover the rent on her tiny room above the general store, and she went to bed each night too exhausted to do more than collapse onto her thin mattress, her shoulders aching and her fingers stiff from scrubbing collars and beating dirt from sheets. "That rancher is here again," Mrs. Henderson called from the front room, her voice carrying a strange note of excitement that made Delia look up from the shirt she was wringing out. Delia wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist and stepped through the doorway, smoothing down her damp apron. A tall man stood at the counter, his hat in his hands, his dark hair slightly disheveled from the wind outside. She had seen him before, bringing in his laundry every 2 weeks like clockwork. Kenneth Everett owned the largest cattle ranch in King County, a spread that stretched for thousands of acres east of the city, and he always paid in crisp bills without haggling over the price. "Miss Owens," he said, his voice deep and steady. His eyes, a startling shade of gray-blue, fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "I wonder if I might have a word with you privately." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shot up nearly to her hairline, and Delia felt her cheeks warm despite the already oppressive heat of the laundry. "Sir, I am working right now." "I will compensate Mrs. Henderson for your time," Kenneth said, already reaching into his vest pocket. He placed several bills on the counter, more than Delia made in a week. "Please, it is a business matter of some importance." Mrs. Henderson snatched up the money with surprising speed. "Take all the time you need, dear." Delia untied her apron with trembling fingers, suddenly aware of how bedraggled she must look, her simple brown dress stained with water and soap, her blonde hair escaping from its pins in damp tendrils. Kenneth Everett was probably 30, handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and the kind of commanding presence that made people step aside when he walked down the street. What could he possibly want with her? They stepped outside into the cool April air, and Delia breathed deeply, grateful for the relief from the stifling laundry. The street was busy with afternoon traffic, wagons rolling past, men on horseback, women with shopping baskets hurrying between stores. "Miss Owens, I will be direct," Kenneth said, turning to face her. "I need someone to manage my household. My housekeeper left 3 months ago to care for her sick sister in Portland, and the ranch has been in chaos ever since. I have tried to hire locally, but no one suitable has presented themselves. You come highly recommended." Delia blinked in surprise. "Recommended by whom?" "Mrs. Henderson speaks very highly of your character and your capabilities. She mentioned you keep meticulous accounts, you are honest, you work harder than anyone she has ever employed, and you have a way of organizing that brings order to confusion." He paused, studying her face. "The position would pay $40 a month, plus room and board. You would have your own quarters in the main house, and you would manage the domestic staff, oversee the cooking and cleaning, handle the household accounts, and ensure that everything runs smoothly. I entertain business associates occasionally, so you would need to coordinate those dinners as well." $40 a month. Delia made $12 a month at the laundry, and half of that went to rent. $40, plus she would not need to pay for housing or food. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. "Why me?" she asked bluntly. There must be women with more experience. Experience can be taught. Character cannot. Kenneth's gaze was steady, honest. I need someone I can trust, someone who will treat my home with respect and care. Mrs. Henderson assured me you are that person. I am willing to take her word for it if you are willing to accept the position. Delia's mind raced. Leave the laundry. Leave the familiar misery of the work that was slowly destroying her body. Move to a ranch miles from town, into the home of a man she barely knew. It seemed reckless, dangerous even. But when she looked down at her reddened, chapped hands, when she thought of another year, another 5 years of breathing in live fumes and scalding her fingers on hot irons, the choice became clearer. I would need to give Mrs. Henderson notice, she said slowly. I already purchased your notice, as it were, Kenneth replied. You could start tomorrow if you wished. I will send a wagon for you and your belongings at 8 in the morning. Tomorrow. Delia's voice came out higher than she intended. That is very soon. I am a decisive man, Miss Owens. I have been managing my household alone for too long, and it shows. I need help, and I believe you need a better situation than what you currently have. It seems we might be able to help each other. There was no arrogance in his tone, just straightforward practicality. Delia found herself appreciating that. She took a deep breath, then extended her hand. All right, Mr. Everett, I accept your offer. His hand engulfed hers, warm and calloused, the grip firm but careful. Thank you, Miss Owens. I think this will work out well for both of us. That night, Delia packed her few belongings into a battered carpet bag, hardly able to believe her life was about to change so dramatically. She owned 3 dresses, 2 nightgowns, a winter coat that had been her mother's, a few undergarments, a hairbrush, and a small wooden box containing her parents' wedding rings and a faded photograph of them on their wedding day. It all fit easily into the bag with room to spare. The poverty of her possessions struck her suddenly, and she sat on the edge of her bed feeling a wave of nervousness wash over her. What if she was not good enough? What if she failed at this position and ended up back at the laundry, or worse, with no job at all? What if Kenneth Everett turned out to be someone other than he seemed, someone dangerous? But fear would not keep her warm or fed. Fear would not heal her hands or give her a future. So she said a prayer, blew out her candle, and tried to sleep. The wagon arrived promptly at 8, driven by a weathered man in his 50s who introduced himself as Charlie, the ranch foreman. Heard the boss finally found someone to manage the house, he said as he helped her up onto the bench seat. Been a madhouse out there without proper organization. You will have your hands full, miss. The ride took nearly 2 hours, following the road east out of Seattle, and then turning onto a private track that wound through dense forest before opening up into rolling grassland. Delia caught her first glimpse of the Everett Ranch in late morning, and her breath caught. The main house was a sprawling 2-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and sides. Barns and outbuildings dotted the landscape, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on hillsides that seemed to stretch forever. The house itself was beautiful but clearly neglected, the porch needing a good sweep, the windows clouded with dust. Kenneth came out to meet them, looking more relaxed than he had in town, dressed in working clothes with his sleeves rolled up. Miss Owens, welcome. Let me show you to your quarters, and then we can discuss your duties. He carried her bag himself despite her protests, leading her through the front door into a spacious entry hall. The house was indeed in disarray, she noted immediately. Dust covered most surfaces, the floors needed scrubbing, and there was a general air of neglect that spoke of months without proper care. But the bones of the house were good, the furniture well made, the layout sensible. Her room was on the second floor, a generous space with a large window overlooking the front pastures. It held a proper bed with a thick mattress, a dresser, a wardrobe, a writing desk, and even a small bookshelf. Compared to her cramped room above the general store, it was palatial. "I hope this will be suitable," Kenneth said, setting her bag on the bed. "If you need anything, just let me know." "It is more than suitable," Delia said honestly. "It is wonderful." He smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard edges. "Good. Now, let me introduce you to the rest of the staff and show you around." There were 3 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. Charlie the foreman, young Billy who was 20 and full of energy, and an older man named Samuel who had worked for Kenneth's father before him. Inside the house, there was Maria, a Mexican woman who came 3 days a week to help with cooking and heavy cleaning, though Kenneth admitted she had been overwhelmed trying to manage everything alone. Maria's face lit up when Kenneth explained that Delia would be taking over as housekeeper and manager. "Oh, thank the Lord," Maria said fervently in accented English. "Is too much for one person, all this house. I do my best, but I cannot do everything." "You have been doing wonderfully," Delia assured her. "Now we will work together to get everything in order." Over the next several days, Delia threw herself into her new role with determination. She woke at dawn, made a thorough assessment of what needed to be done, created schedules and lists, and began systematically addressing the chaos. She reorganized the kitchen, scrubbed the floors herself until they gleamed, aired out all the bedrooms, washed every window, and began keeping detailed accounts of household expenses. Kenneth had given her a household budget that seemed lavish compared to what she was used to, and she found herself able to order proper supplies, replace worn linens, and even hire Maria's daughter Rosa to help several days a week. The transformation was remarkable. Within 2 weeks, the house had gone from neglected to welcoming, and Delia felt a deep satisfaction every time she walked through the rooms and saw the results of her efforts. Kenneth noticed. "You have worked a miracle, Miss Owens," he said one evening when he came in from the range to find the house spotless and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. "I had forgotten how pleasant it is to come home to a well-kept house." "It is my job," Delia replied, but she could not help the pleased flush that warmed her cheeks at his praise. She was learning about him too, in small ways. He woke before dawn and often did not come back until dusk, working alongside his men rather than simply overseeing them. He was fair but firm, respected by everyone who worked for him. He ate whatever was put in front of him without complaint, though she noticed he particularly enjoyed roast beef and apple pie. He read in the evenings, sitting in the parlor with a book while she did mending or went over the accounts. Sometimes they talked, careful conversations about neutral topics like the weather or the ranch operations. But more often they simply shared the space in comfortable silence. It was during one of those quiet evenings about a month after her arrival that Kenneth set down his book and looked at her directly. "May I ask you a personal question, Miss Owens?" Delia set down her mending, suddenly nervous. "I suppose so. Why were you working at the laundry? You clearly have education, intelligence, and abilities far beyond what that position required. What brought you to such circumstances?" The question was not unkind, just curious. Delia found herself wanting to answer honestly. "My father was a logger. My mother died when I was 15, and it was just the 2 of us after that. He made sure I got an education, insisted on it even when money was tight. He wanted better for me than he had. But then there was an accident at the logging camp last year. A widow cable snapped and killed 3 men, my father among them. He left no savings, no property, nothing. I had to find work immediately just to survive. The laundry was the only place that would hire me without experience or references. I am sorry, Kenneth said quietly. That must have been terribly difficult. It was what it was, Delia replied, though her throat tightened at the memory. I did what I had to do. You have courage, Kenneth observed. Not everyone would have persevered as you did. I had no choice. There is always a choice. You could have chosen bitterness or despair, or any number of paths that would have led you somewhere darker. Instead, you chose to work hard and maintain your dignity. That speaks to your character. The warmth in his voice made something flutter in Delia's chest, something she quickly tried to suppress. Kenneth Everett was her employer, nothing more. It would be foolish and dangerous to let herself think of him as anything else. But as the weeks passed, it became harder to ignore the growing connection between them. Kenneth began coming back to the house for the midday meal, something he had not done before. They talked more about books and ideas, about his plans for expanding the ranch, about her thoughts on various improvements to the household. He asked her opinion on things, truly listened when she spoke, treated her as an equal rather than a servant. Delia found herself thinking about him at odd moments, remembering the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his laugh, the way he pushed his hair back when he was frustrated. She looked forward to the evenings in the parlor, to the conversations that ranged from practical to philosophical, to the sense of companionship that had developed between them. It was dangerous territory, and she knew it. She was an employee, dependent on his goodwill for her livelihood. Letting herself develop feelings for him was foolish at best, potentially disastrous at worst. But the heart, she was learning, did not always listen to logic. The situation came to a head on a warm evening in June. Kenneth had invited several business associates for dinner, and Delia had spent days preparing, planning the menu, making sure everything was perfect. The dinner went beautifully, the food excellent, the service smooth, and Kenneth's guests were clearly impressed by the well-run household. After the guests departed, Kenneth found Delia in the kitchen where she was overseeing the final cleanup. "That was exceptional," he said. "Everything was perfect. You have a real gift for this." "Thank you," Delia replied, wiping down the counter. She was exhausted but satisfied. "Delia," Kenneth said, and the use of her first name made her look up sharply. He had always called her Miss Owens before. "Could we talk?" In the study, her heart began to pound, but she nodded and followed him down the hall to the small room he used as an office. He closed the door behind them, and she felt suddenly aware of how alone they were, how improper this was. "I need to say something, and I hope you will hear me out before you respond," Kenneth began, running a hand through his hair in that gesture she had come to know meant he was uncertain. "These past months, having you here, working with you, getting to know you, it has meant more to me than I can easily express. You have brought order to my household, yes, but you have also brought warmth and life and companionship. I find myself looking forward to seeing you each day, to our conversations in the evening, to simply being in your presence. And I realize that I have developed feelings for you that go far beyond those of an employer for an employee." Delia's breath caught. She wanted to speak, but he held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. I know this puts you in a difficult position. You are dependent on me for your livelihood, and that power imbalance makes any declaration of affection from me potentially coercive, whether I intend it that way or not. So I want to be absolutely clear. Your position here is secure regardless of how you respond to what I am about to say. If you do not share my feelings, we will never speak of this again, and nothing will change. You will continue to be my housekeeper for as long as you wish, with all the respect and fair treatment you have always received. But if there is any chance that you might feel the same way, I would like permission to court you properly." The room seemed to spin. Delia pressed her hand against the desk to steady herself. "You want to court me?" "I do," Kenneth said simply. "I think I am falling in love with you, Delia, and I would like the opportunity to see if you might feel the same." All the feelings she had been trying to suppress came rushing to the surface. "I do feel the same," she heard herself say. "I have been trying not to because it seemed impossible, but I do. I think about you constantly. I look for excuses to be near you. When you smile at me, it feels like the sun coming out." The joy that spread across Kenneth's face was beautiful to see. "Truly, truly." Delia felt tears prick her eyes. "But Kenneth, what does this mean? How can we court when I live in your house, work for you? People will talk." "Let them talk," Kenneth said firmly. "I care about your reputation, of course, so we will be circumspect. But Delia, I am 30 years old. I have met countless women over the years, been to socials and dances, been introduced to every eligible woman in the territory, it seems. And I have never felt for any of them what I feel for you. I am not interested in wasting time worrying about what society expects when I have finally found someone who makes me want to be better, who challenges me, who feels like a partner. If you are willing, I would like to pursue this and see where it leads properly and respectfully." Delia felt as though she were standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into unknown waters. But when she looked at Kenneth's face, saw the hope and sincerity there, the decision was easy. "Yes. I would like that too." He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and took her hands in his, careful of her still healing skin. "You have made me very happy." "You have made me happy too," Delia whispered. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, and that simple gesture sent warmth flooding through her entire body. This was real. This was happening. The next months were a strange but wonderful blend of the practical and the romantic. During the day, Delia continued to manage the household, and Kenneth ran his ranch. But in the evenings, after the work was done, they courted. They walked together in the long summer twilights, talking about everything and nothing. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows. She made his favorite desserts. They sat together on the porch and watched the stars come out. And slowly, carefully, they built something real between them. Kenneth was attentive but never presumptuous, always respectful of propriety even as the attraction between them grew stronger. He told her about his childhood, about inheriting the ranch when his parents died in a cholera outbreak 5 years earlier, about the loneliness of building something with no one to share it with. She told him about her dreams of having a home of her own someday, a family, security she had never known. "You have all of that here if you want it," Kenneth said one evening as they sat on the porch, the September air cool and crisp. "With me. I know we have not been courting long, but Delia, I am certain. You are what I want, what I have been waiting for. Marry me, be my wife, my partner, my companion. Help me build this ranch into something lasting. Have a family with me. Grow old with me." Delia turned to look at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Delia felt as though she had finally come home. They were married in October, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Seattle, with Maria and Charlie and the other ranch hands as witnesses. Delia wore a dress she had made herself from cream-colored silk, the most beautiful garment she had ever owned, and Kenneth looked at her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. The wedding night was tender and joyful, any nervousness swept away by the deep trust and affection they had built over the past months. Kenneth was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and desired. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, It felt right and natural and meant to be. Life as Kenneth's wife was different than life as his housekeeper in ways both subtle and profound. She still managed the household because she was good at it and enjoyed the work, but now it was truly her home, not just her place of employment. Now she sat beside Kenneth at his business dinners instead of overseeing them from the kitchen. Now she had a say in the ranch operations, offering ideas that Kenneth considered seriously. Now she wore a gold wedding band that caught the light when she worked, a constant reminder that she was loved and chosen. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of happiness. Kenneth was everything she had hoped for in a husband: kind, passionate, hardworking, affectionate. He made her laugh. He listened to her ideas. He held her close at night and told her she was beautiful. He valued her opinion on everything from cattle prices to the color of new curtains. In the spring, Delia discovered she was pregnant. Kenneth's reaction was one of pure, unrestrained joy. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down and apologized profusely, asking if he had hurt her or the baby. She laughed and reassured him that she was fine, that pregnant women were not made of glass. The pregnancy was largely uneventful, and in December of 1883, Delia gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named James, after Kenneth's father. Holding her son for the first time, looking at his tiny, perfect face, Delia felt overwhelmed by the fullness of her life. 2 years ago, she had been barely surviving, her hands raw from laundry work, her future bleak and uncertain. Now she was a wife, a mother, the mistress of a successful ranch, loved beyond measure. "What are you thinking?" Kenneth asked softly. He sat beside her on the bed, looking at his son with wonder in his eyes. "I am thinking about how much my life has changed," Delia replied. "How grateful I am. How blessed." "I am the blessed one," Kenneth said, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "You have given me everything I did not know I needed. A home, not just a house. A family. A partner. You have made my life complete." Baby James grew into a lively, curious child, and the ranch prospered under Kenneth's management and Delia's careful household oversight. They fell into a rhythm as a family, busy and productive, but always making time for each other. Kenneth made it a point to come back to the house each evening for supper, no matter how much work remained, because family meals were important. Delia kept the household running smoothly while also being involved in the ranch operations, her keen mind for numbers and organization making her an invaluable partner in the business side of things. When James was 2, Delia became pregnant again, and in the fall of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine. The little girl had her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray-blue eyes, and both Kenneth and James were instantly smitten. "Our family is perfect now," Kenneth said, holding his daughter while James climbed onto the bed to see his new sister. "2 healthy children, a successful ranch, and you. I could not ask for anything more." But life, Delia had learned, was not always smooth. In the winter of 1887, a harsh, cold snap killed several head of cattle and damaged some of the outbuildings. It was a financial blow, though not a devastating one, and Kenneth worked tirelessly to minimize the losses and rebuild. Delia supported him through it, managing the household budget carefully, helping where she could, and providing emotional support during the long, stressful weeks. They weathered that storm together, as they would weather others over the years. There were droughts and floods, cattle diseases and market fluctuations, all the challenges that came with ranching in the frontier. But they faced everything as a team, relying on each other's strengths, supporting each other through difficulties. The years passed, bringing changes both large and small. Seattle grew from a rough frontier town into a bustling city. Washington became a state in 1889. The ranch expanded as Kenneth bought neighboring properties until their holdings stretched across thousands of acres. James grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working with his father. Catherine was bright and spirited, full of questions and energy, and through it all, Kenneth and Delia's love deepened. The passionate intensity of those early days matured into something richer, more complex. They knew each other's rhythms, each other's moods, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room. They still made time for each other, still courted each other in small ways, still found magic in a touch, a kiss, a quiet conversation at the end of a long day. One evening in the summer of 1892, 10 years after that fateful day when Kenneth had walked into the laundry and changed her life, Delia stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Kenneth came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, a question that had become their ritual over the years. "About how far we have come," Delia replied, leaning back into his embrace. "About how different my life is from what I ever imagined it could be. About how grateful I am that you walked into that laundry all those years ago." "I am the grateful one," Kenneth murmured. "You could have said no. You could have been content to remain just my housekeeper. You took a chance on me, on us, and you have given me a life more wonderful than I ever dreamed possible." "We gave it to each other," Delia corrected gently. "That is what a partnership is." In the house behind them, they could hear James and Catherine playing, Maria starting to prepare supper, the ordinary sounds of a home full of life and love. The ranch stretched out before them in the fading light, the cattle settling down for the evening, the land peaceful and prosperous. "Do you ever miss it?" Kenneth asked. "The laundry, I mean. Your independence," Delia laughed. "I miss the raw hands and the live fumes. No, I cannot say that I do, but I understand what you are really asking. Do I ever feel like I gave up too much of myself to be your wife? And the answer is no. Because you have never asked me to be less than I am. You have encouraged me to be more. This life we have built, it is not you taking care of me or me serving you. It is us together, building something neither of us could have built alone. That is not a loss of independence. That is the best kind of partnership." Kenneth turned her in his arms so he could see her face. Even after 10 years of marriage, the love in his eyes still had the power to take her breath away. "I love you, Delia Everett, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "And I love you," she replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Always and forever." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they stood together on the porch of the home they had made, surrounded by the life they had built, and Delia felt a profound sense of peace. The scared young woman who had scrubbed sheets for pennies seemed like a different person, from a different lifetime. She had been forged by hardship into someone strong, and then that strength had been rewarded with love. The path had not been easy. There had been struggles and challenges, moments of doubt and fear. But every step had been worth it to arrive at this moment, this life, this love. The following years brought more changes, as years always do. James grew into a tall, capable young man who took on more and more responsibility at the ranch, clearly destined to eventually take over from his father. Catherine developed a passion for horses and could often be found in the stables, much to her mother's amused exasperation. In the winter of 1895, when Delia was 32 and had assumed her childbearing years were behind her, she discovered she was pregnant again. The pregnancy was harder than the previous two had been, perhaps because she was older, and Kenneth fussed over her constantly. But in the spring of 1896, she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Margaret. 3 children, Kenneth marveled, holding his youngest daughter. We are well and truly blessed. The ranch continued to thrive. Kenneth's careful management and Delia's sharp business sense made them one of the most successful operations in the region. They employed dozens of workers, contributed to the local community, and became pillars of the growing society around Seattle. But success and wealth never changed what mattered most to them: their family, their partnership, their love for each other. Kenneth still found excuses to steal kisses in the hallway. Delia still looked forward to their evening conversations. They still made each other laugh, still supported each other through difficulties, still chose each other every single day. On their 15th wedding anniversary in October of 1897, Kenneth surprised Delia with a trip back to Seattle. They left the children in Maria's capable care and spent 2 days in the city, staying at the finest hotel, dining at restaurants, shopping in stores that would have been unimaginable luxuries to the young woman who had once scrubbed floors for survival. On their last evening, Kenneth suggested they take a walk. Delia agreed, bundling into her warm coat against the autumn chill. They wandered through the streets, and Delia realized with a start where they were headed. The old laundry still stood, though it looked even more run down than she remembered. Through the steamed windows, she could see women bent over their work, just as she had been all those years ago. You ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not offered you that job? Kenneth asked quietly. Delia considered the question seriously. I try not to, she admitted, because it frightens me to think how close I came to never knowing this life, never knowing you, never having our children. If you had walked in on a different day, if Mrs. Henderson had recommended someone else, if I had said no out of fear. There were so many points where everything could have gone differently. But it did not, Kenneth said firmly. It went exactly as it was meant to. You were brave enough to take a chance. I was fortunate enough to recognize something special when I saw it. And we were both willing to let ourselves love, even when it was complicated and unconventional. They stood together looking at the laundry, and Delia felt no longing for that past life, only deep gratitude that it had led her to this present one. Let's go home, she said, taking Kenneth's hand. Our real home. As they walked back to the hotel through the gaslit streets, Delia reflected on the strange journey her life had taken. She had learned that strength came in many forms, in the ability to endure hardship, yes, but also in the courage to accept help, to trust, to love, to build something new. She had learned that home was not a place but a feeling, created by the people you loved and who loved you in return. She had learned that sometimes the best things in life came from taking risks, from saying yes when it would have been easier to say no. The years continued their steady march forward. James turned 18 in 1901 and took on even more responsibility at the ranch, showing the same solid character and work ethic his parents had demonstrated. Catherine at 15 was already turning heads in town, though she remained more interested in horses than boys, much to Kenneth's relief. Little Margaret, now 5, was the darling of the household, spoiled by her older siblings and parents alike. Kenneth was now 49, his dark hair shot through with silver, his face weathered by years of sun and wind. But to Delia, he was as handsome as the day he had walked into the laundry. He still had the same steady presence, the same quiet strength, the same way of looking at her that made her feel cherished. At 48, Delia's blonde hair had faded to a softer shade, and there were lines around her eyes and mouth from years of smiling. Her hands, once so damaged by laundry work, had long since healed, though they bore the marks of a life well lived. Small scars from cooking mishaps, calluses from garden work, the permanent indentation where her wedding ring had sat for nearly 20 years. They stood together on the porch one evening in late summer, watching the sun set over their land, and Kenneth pulled her close. "You remember what you said to me once?" he asked. "About us building something together that neither of us could have built alone." "I remember everything you have ever said to me," Delia replied with a smile. "Look at what we have built," Kenneth said, gesturing to the ranch spread out before them. "Not just the land, the cattle, the buildings, but our family, our life, our partnership. You were so right. This is what we created together. And it is still growing," Delia added. "James will take over the ranch someday, and he will bring his own vision to it. Catherine will find her path, whatever that may be. Margaret has her whole life ahead of her. What we built is not finished. It will go on beyond us." "A legacy," Kenneth agreed. "But the most important legacy is not the ranch or the money or even our children, as much as I love them. It is showing them what a true partnership looks like. Teaching them that love is built on respect, trust, and choosing each other every day. That is what will matter most in the end." Delia turned in his arms to face him fully. "You have given me everything I never knew I needed. Safety, security, love, family, purpose, partnership. You saw something in me when I was at my lowest, and you offered me a chance. And then you fell in love with me, and you let me fall in love with you, and you have spent every day since proving that taking that chance was the best decision I ever made." "No," Kenneth said softly, cupping her face in his hands. "The best decision you ever made was saying yes. To the job, to the courtship, to the marriage, to this life. You could have chosen differently at any point, but you kept choosing us, choosing this, choosing me. And I have spent every day grateful for that choice." He kissed her then, sweet and deep, a kiss that held 20 years of love and passion and partnership. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling. From inside the house, they heard Margaret calling for her mother, and the moment of romantic solitude was broken. But that was parenthood, that was life, that was the beautiful chaos of a home full of love. "We should go in," Delia said reluctantly. "In a moment," Kenneth replied, holding her close. "Let me have just one more moment of this. You, me, the sunset, the peace. Let me remember this." So they stood together a moment longer. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded every dream either of them had ever had. In the years that followed, life continued to unfold in ways both expected and surprising. James married a kind, sensible young woman named Eleanor in 1904, and they built a house on the northern section of the ranch, close enough to help manage operations but far enough to have their own space. In 1905, they made Delia and Kenneth grandparents for the first time with the birth of a baby boy they named Kenneth James, after both his grandfather and his father. Holding her grandson for the first time, Delia was overwhelmed by emotion. This tiny baby represented the future, the continuation of everything she and Kenneth had built together. He would grow up on this ranch, just as his father had, surrounded by love and opportunity. Catherine surprised everyone by falling in love with a young veterinarian who came to the ranch to treat a sick horse. David Morrison was intelligent, kind, and shared Catherine's love of animals. They married in 1907, and while they moved to Seattle where David had his practice, they visited the ranch often, and Catherine's eyes always lit up when she rode across the land she still considered home. Margaret, growing into a beautiful young woman, showed an unexpected talent for art. She spent hours sketching the ranch, the animals, the landscape, and her drawings were remarkably good. Kenneth and Delia encouraged her passion, even though it was unconventional for a woman at the time. They had never been conventional themselves, and they saw no reason to force their daughter into a mold that did not fit her. As Kenneth and Delia entered their 50s, They began to slowly step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, leaving more and more to James and Alina. It was not retirement exactly, but a gradual transition, giving them more time to enjoy each other, to travel occasionally, to spend time with their grandchildren. One fall afternoon in 1909, as they sat together on the porch watching the leaves turn gold and red, Kenneth took Delia's hand. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked. Looking back on all of it, Delia was quiet for a long moment, truly considering the question. "No," she said finally, "not a single one. Oh, I wish I could have had more time with my parents, of course. I wish the hard years before I met you had not been so difficult, but I cannot regret them because they made me who I am. They taught me resilience. They taught me to appreciate what I have. They led me to that laundry on the day you walked in, and that changed everything." "I am glad I walked in that day," Kenneth said. "I had been putting off finding a housekeeper for weeks, telling myself I was too busy it could wait. But something made me go that day. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was God, maybe it was just luck, but I will be grateful for it until my dying day." "We have built a good life," Delia said, squeezing his hand. "A really good life. Together." "The best life," Kenneth agreed. As the years passed into the 1910s, the world around them continued to change. Automobiles became more common. Electricity reached even remote areas. The frontier gradually disappeared as civilization spread. But the ranch remained, a constant in a changing world, managed now by James and Alina with the same care and dedication Kenneth and Delia had always shown. Kenneth's hair had gone completely white, and he moved a bit slower than he once had, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Delia as strong as ever. Delia's face bore the lines of a life well lived, each wrinkle a story, each gray hair earned. She was 60 now, and she felt it in her joints on cold mornings, but she also felt blessed in a way that transcended physical comfort. They had 5 grandchildren now, with another on the way. The house that had once echoed with loneliness was now constantly full of life and noise and love. Margaret had moved back to the ranch after studying art in Seattle, setting up a studio in one of the outbuildings where she painted and drew, selling her work in galleries in the city. On their 30th wedding anniversary in October of 1913, the whole family gathered for a celebration. James and Alina came with all their children. Catherine and David made the trip from Seattle. Maria, now elderly herself but still sharp as a tack, presided over the cooking with the help of the younger women. Charlie, the foreman, now well into his 70s and officially retired, but still living in a cottage on the ranch property, told stories of the early days to anyone who would listen. After the dinner, after the toasts and the laughter and the stories, Kenneth and Delia slipped away to their bedroom, tired but happy. 30 years, Delia marveled, sitting at her dressing table to take down her hair. How is it possible that 30 years have passed? Kenneth came up behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "The best 30 years of my life." "And mine," Delia agreed. "Though if you had told that terrified young woman in the laundry that her life would turn out like this, she never would have believed you." "I knew," Kenneth said. "The moment I saw you, something told me you were different, special. I trust my instincts and they have never steered me wrong." "Your instincts told you to marry your housekeeper," Delia teased. "My instincts told me to marry the woman I loved, regardless of how we met," Kenneth corrected. "And it was the best decision I ever made, after hiring you in the first place." As they lay in bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms the way they had been for 30 years, Delia felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had gone from having nothing, being no one, barely surviving, to having everything: love, family, security, purpose, respect. She had gone from being invisible to being valued, from being alone to being cherished. And it had all started with Kenneth walking into a laundry and seeing her not as she was, but as she could be. He had given her a chance, and she had seized it with both hands. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. The years continued to pass, bringing the joys and sorrows that come with age. In 1915, old Charlie passed away peacefully in his sleep, and the whole ranch mourned the loss of a man who had been part of their family for decades. In 1916, Catherine gave birth to twins, bringing the grandchild count to 7. In 1917, America entered the Great War, and while the ranch was far from the fighting, they felt the impact in other ways. Rising prices, food shortages, the constant worry over distant conflicts. Through it all, Kenneth and Delia remained each other's constant. They had grown old together, their bodies slower but their love undiminished. They still held hands when they walked. They still kissed each other good morning and good night. They still looked at each other across a room and smiled, sharing private jokes and memories that only they understood. In the spring of 1920, Kenneth fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the best care, despite Delia's constant presence at his bedside, despite the prayers of the entire family, he did not recover. On a quiet morning in April, with Delia holding his hand, Kenneth Everett passed away at the age of 68. The grief was overwhelming. After nearly 40 years together, Delia felt as though part of her soul had been torn away. The ranch, the house, everything reminded her of him. She saw him everywhere, in the chair where he used to sit, in the barns he had built, in the faces of his children and grandchildren. But even in her grief, Delia was not alone. James and Alina moved into the main house to be close to her. Catherine came and stayed for several weeks. Margaret hardly left her side. The grandchildren, ranging from 15-year-old Kenneth James to 2-year-old Sarah, provided constant distraction and reminded her that life went on, that Kenneth's legacy was alive in all of them. Slowly, painfully, Delia learned to live with the loss. She would never stop missing him, never stop wishing for one more conversation, one more sunset on the porch, one more kiss. But she also recognized that she had been given something precious. Nearly 40 years with a man who loved her deeply, who treated her as an equal partner, who built a life with her that was rich and full and meaningful. She was 67 now, her hair completely white, her movements careful. But her mind remained sharp, and she could still manage the household accounts, still oversee the domestic operations of the ranch, still provide counsel to James when he asked for it. On what would have been their 37th wedding anniversary, Delia went to Kenneth's grave in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch. She brought flowers, yellow ones, his favorite. "I miss you," she said aloud, not caring if anyone heard. "Every single day I miss you. But I am also grateful. Grateful for every moment we had, every word we spoke, every kiss we shared. You saved me, Kenneth. You gave me a life I never could have imagined. You loved me when I had nothing to offer but myself, and you spent 40 years proving that I was enough." The wind rustled through the grass, and Delia imagined it was Kenneth's answer, his presence somehow still with her. "I will keep going," she promised. "I will live well, because that is what you would want. I will love our children and grandchildren. I will take care of this ranch. I will honor everything we built together. And someday, when my time comes, I will find you again. I believe that. I have to believe that." She sat by his grave for a long time, remembering. The handsome stranger who walked into a laundry, the careful courtship, the wedding day, the birth of their children, the years of partnership and love, the laughter and the challenges and the quiet moments that made up a life. Finally, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in the gold and pink colors Kenneth had loved. Delia stood. Her body was old and tired, but her spirit was still strong. "I love you," she said to the grave, to the wind, to the memory of the man who had changed her life. Always and forever. Delia lived for another 8 years. Years filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with the continuation of the ranch operations, with the satisfaction of seeing the legacy she and Kenneth had built continue to grow and thrive. She told stories about Kenneth to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive. She advised her children and grandchildren on matters of the heart, always emphasizing the importance of partnership, respect, and choosing each other every day. On a warm evening in June of 1928, at the age of 75, Delia Everett passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was buried next to Kenneth on the hill overlooking the ranch, just as she had requested. The entire community came to pay their respects, testimony to the impact she had made, the life she had lived, the love she had shared. James stood at his mother's grave and remembered a woman who had come from nothing and built everything. Eleanor held his hand and thought about how Delia had taught her what it meant to be a true partner in a marriage. Catherine wept for the mother who had always encouraged her to be herself. Margaret painted a portrait from memory of her parents dancing together in the parlor, young and in love. The grandchildren, now grown with children of their own, promised to tell their children about the great-grandmother who had been a laundress and became a lady through love and courage. The ranch continued for generations after, always in the Everett family, always managed with the same care and dedication that Kenneth and Delia had shown. The main house, expanded and updated but still recognizable, remained the heart of the operation. In the parlor, prominently displayed, hung Margaret's painting of Kenneth and Delia dancing, a reminder to all who saw it of the love story that had started it all. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings when the light hit just right, ranch hands swore they could see 2 figures on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, together even in eternity. Whether it was really their spirits or just the power of a love story so strong it left an imprint on the land, no one could say. But everyone agreed that if any love deserved to last forever, it was the love between Kenneth Everett and Delia Owens, the wealthy rancher and the laundress who became partners in every sense of the word. Their story became part of the ranch's history, told and retold with each generation. How they met when she had nothing and he had everything, but he saw past circumstances to the person beneath. How they built a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. How they weathered every storm together. How their love created a legacy that lasted long after they were gone. And at the heart of the story was always the same message, that true love sees potential, not just presents circumstances. That courage to take a chance can change everything. That a partnership built on respect, trust, and genuine affection can weather any storm. That the best things in life often come when we least expect them, and in forms we never imagined. The laundress and the rancher. The woman with nothing and the man with everything. They found each other, chose each other, built a life together that neither could have built alone. And in doing so, they created something beautiful and lasting. A love story that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come. A testament to the power of taking chances, seeing beyond surface circumstances, and choosing love even when it is complicated or unconventional. Their graves on the hill remained well tended always, flowers planted fresh each spring, the stones kept clean. And if you stood there on a quiet evening and listened carefully, you might almost hear the echo of their voices, still talking, still laughing, still choosing each other, still building their forever together. because some loves are so strong they transcend time and space, becoming part of the very land itself, eternal and unbreakable, a beacon of hope for all who come after.